ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this part of the network conference of the partnership in this autumn, and the panel part accompanied and presented by an impulse by McKinsey. Before we are going into the details of a panel discussions, I would like to introduce to you Saskia Hedrich from McKinsey & Company. Ms. Hedrich is a member of the leadership team in McKinsey's apparel luxury division, and for more than 2 decades has been engaged in supporting companies in strategy development, sourcing, and many other topics. Additionally, she's been involved in creating development strategies for national garment industries, and last but certainly not least, she's a co-author of the State of the Fashion report. She will now give us quite a few empirics, data, and their interpretation from McKinsey's and her personal interpretation on the topic Time for Change, how to use this crisis to make fashion sourcing more agile and sustainable. With this and without further ado, I will hand over to Saskia Hedrich. We cannot hear you yet.
Introduction, Jürgen, and thank you for the invitation to speak at the Textiles Partnership. It's a wonderful opportunity to make change happen. And what I want to speak about today is looking really beyond the crisis. I know we are in Europe in the second wave, as in some other regions, but what we have noticed is a number of changes which the industry had started even sometimes a decade ago, but was slow to implement, have now really received a boost, and there's an opportunity for systemic transformation. Let me start off by giving a bit of background on the current market situation. What we see in 2020 and what we expect is really on a global level decline, depending on the scenario, by 15 to 30%. Still, the holiday season is still playing out. And when we look at that, this is now on a retail level, the gap between winners and losers is widening. And while a number of companies are struggling to really survive, other companies are even thriving in the growth and are able to build on their strengths. And happy to announce that next week, actually, our new State of Fashion report will discuss more about what differentiates these companies. However, overall, as a global industry, we are really facing unprecedented challenges today. No one could have foreseen this level of the crisis in terms of health and humanitarian, but also economic challenges. And we are just starting to see some of the economic challenges. But what we are observing on brand and retailer level, for example, and similarly also on supplier level, is that companies are starting to move from this initial state of panic in spring to now move to more of a playbook how to manage risk and build up resiliency further. We all know that the industry has been really hit across the value chain. And the crisis has revealed weaknesses and with really on all the levels. On the one hand side, overstocks the brand and retailers were struggling with, the cancellations and payment delays for the suppliers, difficulties in actually receiving fabrics, and disruptions of the logistics chain. But we also saw an acceleration of consumer trends and with online really growing within 8 months, for example, in Germany, within in this 8 months they had a growth which is so 6 years. So now we are looking at an online share of more than 25% in Europe. Casual and leisure obviously had a real boost and gained share. And at the same time, sustainability received a new meaning. And yes, it might look like that some of the topics initially dropped off the radar, but they are full on back with climate change. Also, consumer activism was crucial in this crisis for the industry to really change the relationships and for suppliers and buyers this year. I think we have to be serious. 2021 is not yet the great recovery. I think we had some great news about vaccines, but in terms of the industry, recovery still will take some time. But the time is to act now. And the coming months are really shaping the future. As mentioned before, a number of the changes have been discussed since years, but we might have been a bit slow to adapt. And now there's a lot of energy in the industry to make change happen and to pull together to get through the crisis, but also to get to a better normal. And just to highlight, shortly mention a couple of the numbers I'm going to quote are coming on one of the surveys we've ran, and this is a time for change. And we've done this together with Sourcing Journal. And I want to really focus on what does the future look like. And we know sourcing must reshape really for a demand-driven model and for a sustainable model. But what does this mean and why is it so crucial now? If we look at the demand-driven side, Edited, a analytics company, has shown that up to 60% of the assortments for brands and retailers are on sale. So we are far away from really being able to offer customers the right assortment. We have far too many overstocks in the system. And in our work as McKinsey with our clients, we see that moving to a demand-driven model, actually suppliers, brands and retailers can achieve at least a full price sales through increase of 5 to 10% and increase their product margin by 3%. So it's a different focus from just looking at cost to really focus on what consumers want and if we are able to supply that to them. Sustainability, I think we have the decade of really activity now to achieve the Paris Agreement, just as one of the examples. And in recent conversations, one of the industry leaders I was talking to was saying, I'm really even not thinking about decades, but it's less than 20 seasons. And I think that resonates with many of the apparel in the apparel world. And I would say it's really less than 20 seasons because much of the assortment has already been planned and decided. But what do we need to do as brands and retailers to enable that, and how does this really impact also suppliers? There are 4 key elements and 4 key enablers to reset sourcing for this better normal. And I will discuss them in turn in the following slides and just want to give a short overview here. One is really remapping the sourcing mix, which means, so do we have really the right countries, but also do we have the right decision models to decide on the countries, and are we really also leveraging for strategies like dual sourcing for flexibility? So it's not about just this kind of, I think there was always the talk about the caravan is moving to the next low-cost sourcing countries. No, the question is really, is the setup we have in sourcing the one which supports a flexible and agile model? Secondly, it's about digitizing the value chain. And here it's digitizing, really starting with design, with planning, but also through transparency with the suppliers, really at the start of the value chain. So it's about really moving from individual initiatives, which we saw over the last couple of years, so improvements here and there, to a more fully scaled transformation and digital and analytics. Thirdly, it's about forging supplier partnerships. Without suppliers, the brands and retailers aren't able to implement the flexibility needed. They aren't able to implement sustainability. And here, I think the crisis has laid open that there are some weaknesses, but also a lot of energy has been set free to look into new ways of collaboration. The fourth is really transforming operation models, which means rethinking the roles. So how does design even work together with the suppliers? How do we rethink the roles of the sourcing office? In terms of the country shifts, here we really see an acceleration of shifts, but it's even not just about the individual countries. It's really about also integrated supply chains. And here we see that 64% of our sourcing executives and other stakeholders believe that this trend is really strongly accelerated. Because weaknesses in fabric supply, for example, have been laid open. We also know that postponement strategies or flexibilities are so far more successful when working with integrated players. At the same time, companies are looking more into nearshoring. But to do that, more manufacturing clusters have to be developed. We have some great opportunities in Europe, in North Africa from a European perspective, but also in Latin America for US players. However, sometimes here we still lack the fabric supply, or we have certain setups which aren't as efficient yet. So moving to building these manufacturing clusters will be crucial to enable that. As said before, it's not even just about individual countries, but it's also how to play with this set of selected countries. So where are opportunities to use more flexibly dual sourcing? Where are opportunities? Do we have the right assortment really at the right countries? And how is the decision made? Are we already including full price sales through and product margin in our decision, or are we still at a model where we look at just the FOB price and cost? So it's a rethinking also in terms of country shifts from an old model of cost to a new model of a demand-driven supply chain. And that requires data and intelligent sourcing. And when we look at digital, I think what many companies are now testing, and I think all of us are every day in so many video conferences, and obviously this is also in the fashion world, so no surprise here. So many tests and a real boost in terms of digitization in product development. And these are technologies, I think, which some leading players have already implemented over the next years. And what we see here is these changes are going to stick. It's not just like an interim solution during the pandemic and during travel restrictions we are all facing. This is about changing the process. It's not even about individual tools, but how to collaborate in 3D design, for example, is far more than just implementing a solution. So here, what's interesting and what I want to highlight on this chart is also that there's a significant share already talking about making these solutions as common practice and tools, and we see in light blue. But also a number of players, so it's varies between 10 and almost 20%, look into broader, really digital sourcing transformation. And these are the industry leaders, and there's far more room there. And there's also a role to play for suppliers in this transformation. As shortly mentioned before, intelligent sourcing is also becoming more important. So which means, here we talk about tools which are enabling design and processes, but it's also about using data in a different way. And just to give you one highlight on the country selection, there already 20% of companies, of respondents were talking about really implementing intelligent sourcing, so advanced analytics in the country decision as a common practice, and 8% are looking into that as a sourcing transformation. So a significant start, but by far not yet the majority of the industry. So a lot of room in digitization and analytics. But in the end, one of the core enablers are the closer partnerships. And here, as you see on the slide, it's really almost 3/4 of the sourcing stakeholders which say, yes, we need to reduce transactional relationships, and we are only able to reach our targets if we move to closer partnerships, if we work differently with our suppliers. We know that not just from what happened in spring and the disruptions there, even before like a publication we did last year when we looked at sustainable sourcing, we took us at where the partnerships actually stand, because it's a topic, one of these topics which have been discussed now since years, and I think you all agree with me. And there, I think we were even a bit disappointed already last year, because we saw that only a third of the sourcing of the models, interaction models, were really strategic partnerships. The most common interaction models were still transactional, or if it was long-term, without any commitments. So as we are looking to our suppliers now for moving the needle in terms of sustainability and with new investments in terms of efficiency improvements and more flexibility, partnerships will become crucial to make that actually happen. However, what we also need to be aware of, consolidation in the industry will be happening. And as we see winners and losers on the retailer and brand side within this very pressured situation, we also see that on a manufacturing side. And retailers and brands are looking to consolidate, and they are looking to consolidate and move to larger and more advanced suppliers to actually reach their targets. So as manufacturers, I think every manufacturer, and in many discussions I have, manufacturers are really looking closely into what kind of investments are differentiating us. So thinking about the investments in sustainability, how can this be communicated? But even thinking as manufacturer, what's the value we create there? So it's, yes, we sell clothes and we sell products and volume, but it's also about what is the value we create actually for the consumer, and how can we change our model? And the most advanced manufacturers are also rethinking in that perspective, like the brands and retailers are. And this significant transformation, which we see on the manufacturing level, it started, but it's still slow also in terms of semi-automation. So we see that 40% of the sourcing stakeholders believe that there's already a reduction of employees per manufacturing site with semi-automation. But again, there are lighthouse cases around the world of manufacturers which are upskilling their workforce and really moving to revolutionize production processes, which I think in apparel we know there hasn't been a lot of change for decades and decades. What does it mean in terms of operating model? So I was talking about the internal operating model as at brands and retailers before, so how design and sourcing works together, that has to change. But also the operating model of how to work with external partners. And here, as an example, working for brands with their suppliers. So a lot of the innovation is happening on the supplier stage, as discussed before. And what we see is that at the moment, sourcing executives don't really believe that co-investment will be happening. So it's really only 17% which think it's likely that co-investments will be done by brands and retailers together with suppliers to change. We know that there are many other models around in terms of how to support suppliers with financing, but it's definitely one of the areas where more discussions are taking place now to support the transformation in terms of sustainability, climate change, but also to a demand-driven model. So there's a number of strategic questions the sourcing executives and brands need to address for the better normal. But I think just for the broader audience group here, I think the one takeaway from this presentation, I hope you all have, is it's imperative to work together to achieve this change for an agile and sustainable sourcing model. And thank you for the opportunity to present some thought starters for a discussion.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Hedrich, for this very, very broad look at it. And I think we all see that the boat has been rocked and is still rocking. That change is not at the doorstep, but it's already here. Before we jump into the panel discussion, I would like to put one question to you. We received from the audience. That is, do you also see a shift of buying power?
I think what we are seeing and is a start of a rethinking. So we all know that the power is distributed quite unfairly, but we start to see more rethinking in terms of how to create fairer models. So as an example, on the one hand side, if we think about negotiation, think about workers to really safeguard wages from negotiations. That's one example. But on the other hand, also the examples we now saw in the industry, and I think you have some of the colleagues in the discussion group later, which are driving this, to say, what are the opportunities manufacturers really have to be more proactive in changing terms and in really perhaps even be more selective about their customers. And I know definitely from conversations that some of the most advanced manufacturers, they are already at a stage where they are quite selective of their customers. They're also looking very closely at their financial power. They're looking very closely at their practices. And, we definitely see some change here, but we shouldn't close our eyes of the current realities.
Okay. Yeah, Ms. Hedwig, thank you so much. Please stay with us in this conference and have a look how the discussion goes. I would like to now switch over to the panel discussion and open with a few words for framing it. So the question is why this panel? We want to flip the perspectives because millions of people, thousands of companies are producing, especially in Asian countries. They generate income, they provide jobs, they pay taxes, and they create fashion in a myriad of production steps and facilities. The textile industry in Asia does and can do things that many other industries cannot do anymore because they have divested from textile production. So we see there a very strong position, not just when it comes to scale and cost, but also to capabilities. And as Ms. Hedrich also mentioned that the industry in Asia is often at the receiving end when it comes to supply chain relations and the change in supply chain relations. Power seems to be very unevenly distributed still. So the questions we want to pose today in a broader view is, will this change? How will this change? In what direction will it change? Will it change into the direction of more sustainable business? And who should do what to drive this change? Ms. Hedrich made, I think, a very compelling case for this change. And I would also like to have a look at it. Is she right? Is the perspective from producing countries the same perspective as she provided us with? To shed light into these topics, we invited very renowned, distinguished guest representatives or bigwigs from the industry to the table, or better to the screen. But before we introduce our renowned guests, I would like to share with you, the audience, a few information about procedures. We urge the audience, so the online audience, to use the chat function. We will sort through the questions and pose some of those to the panelists. We also prepared some assembly topics. No, wait, we are not yet there. We also prepared a few assembly questions, so be prepared to answer. The first questions will come in a minute. And we also invited somebody, Ms. Lehmann, for a graphic recording. She is looking at what will happen and what will be discussed here in this room, and will come up with a picture we will have a look at the end of the discussion. So first of all, let me start with the first assembly question and go back for the login. So here again, you can have a look at the assembly login. Maybe write it down or post a link so that you can switch to it easily. The first questions would be about the organizational affiliation you have, so that we know who is in the audience. We are having a look at it quite quickly. So enough of logistics and so on. I would like now to really introduce our distinguished guests here at the panel. And I would like to start with Dr. Rubana Haq, the president of the BAGMEA, entrepreneur, poet, and certainly one of the most outspoken ambassadors for the industry, and not just for Bangladesh, but also for Asia. Those of you who are following through the discussions, especially also in this year, have heard her, have seen her, and I'm very, very proud that we have her here on the panel. The second guest I would like to introduce is Nazma Akhtar. She's founder and executive director of the Avajak Foundation. She's a fighter for worker rights, and especially also for women's rights, and she's president of a federation of unions in Bangladesh. She's a Ashoka Fellow, and she's also on Industry All. Third, I would like to introduce to you Herman Leong. He's head of operations at Dakota Company, a large and vertically quite integrated company with facilities in China, Cambodia, and Myanmar. And I think it's not too much calling him a change and transition manager who will certainly give us some interesting insights when it comes also to the topics that Ms. Hedrich just looked at. Fourth, I would like to introduce to you Christina Heyerhaus-Clausen, Director Textile and Garment at Industry All. She's also a very long career at very visible positions in the industry, not just at Industry All, but also at the board of ACT. She was and maybe still engaged in the Accord, and now is a board member of the newly established Ready-Made Garment Sustainability Council. So also to you a very warm welcome. And last but certainly not least is Matthijs Klite from the Federation, International Apparel Federation. Before he has become the Secretary General there, he's been with Modin in the Netherlands, quite a few other positions, and is also a lecturer at university. So welcome to this panel. And before we start with the questions, I would like to have a look at who's in the audience, so the assembly results, so that you also know to whom you are talking to. Can we have a look at the results of the organizational affiliations? So nearly 2/3 of people in the room have a business affiliation. A few 10% manufacturers. We have trade union NGOs, nearly 20%. The government is suspiciously absent. That will be remedied later today. Standard organizations and other organizations are also in the room. Very quick look at it. Secondly, I would directly pose the next question to the audience and ask you to tell us what comes to mind, what jumps into your mind when you think about future supply chain relations. Give us one keyword or 2 or 3 keywords, and we will have a look at that later in the discussion or after the first round of discussion better. So finally, we can start the discussion. I would like to kick off with the topic of looking into the future. Ms. Hedrich from McKinsey already did that. And I would also ask you to give us the key features of supply chain relations from your individual perspectives. What are the topics, Dr. Hook? What would be the key features from BGMEA's point of view when it comes to future supply chain relations?
Thank you very much for including all of us in your platform today. Very grateful to be given this opportunity. Very quickly, I wish I could be that optimistic. I'm not, because the uneven balance of power and control will take time to shift. It's not going to happen overnight. It's probably not even going to happen during our lifetime, but at least the journey has begun. So with COVID, what has happened is, most of all, we've all woken up to new realities where we've had order cancellations overnight. We've had knee-jerk reaction from many clients, from many buyers, brands, and retailers, and quite understandable. So also to a certain extent, because they were also facing uncertainties. So to be fair to all, it was fine. But the point is, one also has to consider the reality of a third world country. I mean, our reality and buyers' reality are not the same. So here, the first thing that came into question was the viability of the workers' salaries. And every month we pay around $423 million of wage to ready-made garment workers. So automatically we just came up with, we were faced with a lot of force majeure clauses, and we had just random cancellations. And then, of course, when we engaged with everyone and pleaded and begged and urged and did whatever that we did, then things came around. But the first reaction, luckily, was from our own government. So going forward, if you ask me, what do I see? I still see uncertainty. I still see a lot of.
Oh. Now I think Ms. Hook.
That are actually popping in the screen. But you know, transparency cannot just be requested out of just supply chain. Transparency has to be right from sourcing as well. So responsible sourcing, responsible supply chain, which will ensure sustainability of the industry, including the sustainability of the workers' lives and livelihood, all have to fall into place. So going forward, I still see uncertainties, but we are definitely hopeful because, as you mentioned, Latina is in RSC, RMG Sustainability Council, where three parties are in it together. So there are brands, there are labor, and there's also industry. It's a difficult conversation, but you know, at least it's happening, and that makes us hopeful because you know anything now has to be collaborative, and we just can't have different constituencies voicing out different concerns. We all have to have a singular version, but we have to work collaboratively. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this strong statement, and I think it's very good to directly switch over to Herman Liang. I think from the perspective of a larger company with substantial stakes in various countries, so not just in Bangladesh, what will you do? Are you rethinking, as Ms. Hedrich just told you, just mentioned? And is there, for example, signs of co-investment and joint responsibility between you as a producer and sourcing companies?
Thank you for the invitation. So I'm pleased to share the point of view. So for you is we talk about co-investment. So McKinsey report talk about there was most likely pessimistic that not much majority of the buyers that thinks that they should be doing co-investment, right? So the problem I think for this is we need to think about the collaborations. So in terms of the relations, the supply chain relationship that we're talking about today, it is being improving from time to time. I'm thinking that before of the day, we already started to talk about this with the buyers. And then we started to think about this. We should think about partnership rather than transactional behavior. And then also we need to think about the long-term capacity planning, the order commitment in order to secure this sustainable investment. Just like what you said, the co-investment. People, we all want renewable energy. We all want our garment, our textile come from green energy. And all this needs to substantial investment. And then if there was no commitment from buyer, from the upstream, and then all this, the suppliers, the manufacturer, the factories can only do it alone by themselves. And one more point I want to say that is we need to think about like this COVID-19 crisis. We need to think about to jump over this game theory track. And what we're thinking of, actually, this is all about the nature of human face crisis, the response. And then easily could understand this all comes from a personal dilemma, which is we learned from school. Actually, this is coming to the same. It's like a paradox decision analysis that two individuals that acting on their own self-interest on not producing the optimal outcome. Do you know what I mean? So at this result, and both parties they find themselves end up in a worse state than if they can have cooperate from each other in the decision-making process. So this is very important that from after this COVID-19, we all talk about we need to rethink, we need to restart the process. But where should we restart? I think that from my experience, from my thinking it is, we need to rethink the decision-making process and the mentality and the mindset, how we should do it in the process. For example, like if we make a decision for good for the long term, probably bad for the short term. If you make a decision that's good for the short term, it's probably bad for the long term. And then what is the incentive system nowadays today? Is incentives-wise our CEO, not only our factories, not the manufacturers, but also the buyers, but also the brands, the retailers, and also maybe our upstreams, the fabric suppliers, the textile suppliers, and also accessory suppliers. So what is the system incentive for this order taking over for the CEO? And if that all these are the short-term interests for them to keep the positions and keep all this from short 1 or 2 years, and then the decisions will make along with that. And then we need to look at this, is this any system index is monitoring, is looking at all this together, and then we will see the decision, how did people make this decision according to this. So for me, I think from a long-term perspective, the partnerships, the relationships is improving. And COVID-19 is giving us a main challenge, but also a very good reminder that we should be think about what is from the decision making. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think we will come back later to this question of what are the barriers aside from a game theoretic point of view. Nasma Akhtar, to you, as a fighter for women and worker rights, who are often at the receiving end of developments of change, what are your central requirements out of the workers' perspective? What must change when you look at the big picture?
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk. If I about this picture of worker in the supply chain, it should be responsible business behavior from the brand side as well as supplier side. We haven't seen this because this pandemic we found when the first lockdown in Europe, America, the suspension, holding, discount, and it's also workers take their salary also discount. So which is affected the millions of life and livelihood. So that's need to be ensured the workers' livelihood, how they protect, and also with the social protection system, unemployment benefit. When we learn the workers are not respect from the brand side, from the supplier side. And especially its exploitation, the women's and their life, millions of women's, and when the workers lost their job, they haven't get their proper compensation. Pregnant women their job, and factory when they are not properly taking responsibility, even workers not getting 1 month full salary. So why the people who are taking the profit, the margin, like the biggest one, they have to be more responsible. But all the responsibility goes to the workers. So that is why we want the social protection unemployment benefit scheme. And how do we ensure the living wages, which will be affected? And we need freedom of association and collective bargaining, where especially women-leaded unionists, and they have to negotiation and they have to ensure the workers' welfare, well-being, as well as the productivity. We need women leadership in the factory level management also. We need daycare center and breastfeeding rights, because this is also a big challenge. Most of our skill workers also move because we don't have that kind of system. So brand and supplier should be responsible for that. And we need the trust building between workers and management and brand. It's a big gap, and there is nobody has the trust each other and no responsible and holding accountable. And we need awareness education, especially for the floor level management as well as the workers about their rights, about their responsibility, their behavior, how make things are very responsible and sustainable. And also we need to be a systemic change. Power should be distributed equal because the buyer has a lot of power, supplier has a lot of power, but the workers, the women's worker doesn't have any power. And we need to systemic change as we Rana Plaza or Tajrin 7 years, 8 years, but we haven't that change. The approach should be the bottom, not from the brand side, from the production country side, and approach should become from the workers. What is their need? What is their demand? And we don't want the charity. We don't want that people has made the proposal and project and we need to be implement. Which will be reality? What is the needed for the people, industry? What is needed for the workers? That kind of things need to be uh, um, uh, action plan, and we need to be short-term, mid-term things, and also to be and the nutrition, because this is the big challenge. Like Bangladesh, in Asia, Bangladeshi garments workers are earned less than $100. How they have to survive? How they have to do? So these kind of issues very important. The workers' well-being, the future of work, the automation, how affected women's job, how they are affect their life. So many things, and union busting, the unfair labor practices. When women want to organize the union, still we are threatened by police, we are threatened by the local groups, factory doesn't want, so we want to volunteer kind of things. So this is the things I believe, and we want to work together. As Sister Christina also will talk about how the industrial approach and how we work together. So that is why we need to all stakeholders responsible and showing the positive things and how workers' life and livelihood and productivity improve. That we need to be done. We don't need to be five-star hotel business class thing, but basic human rights and fundamental issue, food, housing, clothing, education, recreation, savings. That's the things our demand. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that input. I think we come back to that also later. In the direction of asking also Ms. Oko if you are forming a coalition from workers and companies together to build a front against brands. But first of all, I would like to hand over to Christina, asking her to add from the global union perspective on it. What is your take on the situation, and where should the shift, the future supply chain relation go to? And is it the same across different countries, or is it very specific from country to country?
So thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and with my other panelists. Well, I would say that the shift has already begun. I think from the global level, from Industrial Global Union, we've always seen the supply chain really needing supply chain industrial relations. So where there's a role for trade unions, suppliers, and manufacturers. Clearly, the way the the sector is organized with multiple brands sourcing from different suppliers or in the same factory at the same time, booking capacity, we knew we needed a system that could work, that could mirror the manufacturing. So the way we look at it from industrial is that there is a way to pool brands leverage their relationship with the suppliers to make systemic change. Clearly, we know that this has been quite successful in changing the way we look at industrial relations. And I think one key development in this whole process is the voice of the suppliers, the manufacturers. as we have the work that we've been doing in Bangladesh and across other countries through the ACT model, where we feel that, through industry-wide bargaining, there is a way for suppliers to have their concerns heard and hold brands accountable for their purchasing practices. So this is the work that we've been working on for the last, I would say, 3 years. But this role of how to create industrial relations in the global textile garment supply chain is key. It's the key to the future. I don't see any other way that we can make this a sustainable industry without having strong industrial relations. And that also includes the brands. Like, it's not a place that this is just between trade unions and manufacturers as employers, but brands, as it's been mentioned, there is this power dynamics in the industry. We need to find a way, and I think we have a way to ensure that we can make systemic change in the industry. So I would say from an industrial perspective, that's the policy that we've been pursuing. Clearly, COVID has underscored the need and the fragility of the supply chain, and also kind of lifted the rock, I would say, of where the risk really is. The risk is on the suppliers and their workers in this model. And we need to find a way to shift that risk. That risk needs to be shared between suppliers and brands and workers. It can't always be on the production side. So I'll leave it at that, and I'm sure we'll have other follow-up questions.
So the systematic change and power as one, as two important take-ups. Matthijs, the same question to you. As a business association, what has to change? Where do you see future supply chain relations go? And to cite you were calling for supply chain solidarity in the crisis. Is that also a concept that will survive the crisis and be part of this systemic change? Will this concept of solidarity really hold water from your perspective?
Yeah, first of all, Mr. Janssen, thank you very much for inviting me. It's great to be among this panel. Represent the IAF, the International Apparel Federation. Before I fully answer your question, it's probably good to explain just a little bit that the IAF is a global network of industry associations. So our perspective is the supply chain. We have industry associations that represent mostly brands, small, medium-sized in Germany and other European countries, Australia, and a lot of associations that represent manufacturers. So our interests that we represent are the interests of the solidarity among those players in the supply chain. And to answer your question, on the longer term, I'm optimistic. Let me say that, because I think the systemic changes that have been described quite well by McKinsey, I think are real. They can't be avoided. It is what the industry needs to do. It is what the industry is already doing. And I think some of these systemic changes are good for manufacturers. It doesn't mean that we're there yet, not at all. It's going to be a very rocky ride. We'll get to that, I think, later in the discussion. There's a lot of work to be done. It's important that manufacturers are represented in many of the platforms that they're not represented yet. I think it's interesting that the McKinsey study, which is really good, but it focuses on the input from people that are sourcing. It works with people with the sourcing journal, which perhaps would better be called the supply chain journal, because it needs to be from both sides. That's just an example. But I think where the systemic change is helping us is that processes have to be shaped across the supply chain, with buyers and manufacturers working jointly on design and development. And when manufacturers become an integral part of these processes, of design and development processes. And when the strength of that process determines the success of the company, when the upstream success determines the downstream success, then manufacturers do have a better position. They cannot be so easily replaced. Value is created. And I just heard yesterday Edwin Kay, who is the CEO of the Hong Kong Research Institute, say we have a deflationary industry. I thought that was a rather ominous but a good term. And that applies to money, but it also applies to people. So when there's more mutual need for each other in the supply chain through the systemic change, that will also apply to the employees and the employers. So yes, I think solidarity needs also a systemic underpinning. I think that's underway. I think it's going to be tough, but I think we're on the way there.
Thank you so much. And with this, I would like to close the first round and have a look at the question to the audience, what their keywords are when it came to future supply chain relation. This is not really empirics, but just a glimpse what the audience thinks about. A few keywords, please. Are you ready? Oh, can we see the big screen? Okay, I think there are quite a few of the topics that that also arose here in this discussion. I think that Ms. Akhter said and came up with the transparency topic. The topic of human protection is here. Due diligence came up. We will take this later. Traceability. So supply chain relations cover all the basic things we are normally subsuming under the term of sustainability and sustainable supply chain management. We have a look at that later again, and I would like now to have a quick sneak preview at Ms. Lehmann's picture, if you're ready. Okay, I think this is the first very quick picture we have here, and I think as we talk, this will further develop. Maybe also that the technical support can give us a sneak preview later as the picture more and more develops. And with this, without really discussing on this already, I would like to switch over to the second round of discussion. We prepared a few questions again, and surprise, surprise, this is under the headline of power relations. For this, I would like also to kick off with a assembly question to the audience. These questions we passed, we gave you 4 questions. Log into Assembly, have a look at the questions, and give us the rating. We are asking questions so that that you and our panelists know what we are asking. For example, we will be asking, the next 5 years we'll see a power shift from brands and retailers towards garment manufacturers, and we are asking the audience if they think this is something that will happen or not. Okay, looking at power relations, we at the Partnership for Sustainable Textiles have the OECD due diligence concept at the core of our working program, and in essence it propagates the shift, the shared responsibility with a focus on brands and retail buyers, what they have to do or refrain from doing, so that companies in producing countries can make the change that is necessary and possible. So action here to enable change in producing countries. In the discussion, especially also in the public discussion here, this thinking always or often leaves the impression that that the people, companies and organizations in garment producing countries are dependent on the good or bad behavior here, more or less utterly dependent. So our consumers and the companies in Europe and America are responsible for the situation. And I would like to jump into it and asking again, starting with Dr. Hook, what does the BGMEA brings to the table? Are your companies utterly dependent on the good or bad behavior of companies and consumers here in consuming countries? What are your strong points when you go into negotiations?
Thank you. I can only tell you that we've tried acting on our own in terms of green factories, and Bangladesh has the maximum number of green factories and great production spaces, but we don't have the green price. So even when we voluntarily go forward, there is very feedback, or we are not incentivized for good deeds. There isn't any brand which is actually paying us more for doing better things. Yes, I mean, we are probably being better featured as better suppliers. There's still lack of incentive, meaning sustainability or excellence cannot be a matter of just ticking the boxes. Then it only stays that way. It has to go beyond just the level of compliance and due diligence, because it cannot be that simplistic, it cannot be that easy. Even from our manufacturers' end, there's a lot of mindsets that need to be handled. Like Najma brought in a topic of trade union registration and everything. It has gone up significantly. This time, almost 86% compared to what we had in 2014. But are these quality trade unions? Is there proper work going on there? So lots of things need to be addressed together. It's not a question of brands being bad or suppliers being bad or labor side being bad. All of us have shared responsibilities. So it's a question of mutually reinforcing each other. So from our end, I don't think the power shift is going to happen, but I think COVID has been a great leveler. At least we have started realizing that brands can't do whatever they want to do. Suppliers or manufacturers just can't do whatever they want to do. And also labor side cannot just go ahead and do whatever they want to do. All of us are accountable right now, because there's social media, there's increased transparency. So we just can't hide behind just old rhetoric. We have to back it up with data. I think data is one thing that we need to bank on. And, I call it the et cetera culture. So whenever any point is brought forward, everybody says, this is what happens in Bangladesh. No, it does not. In a country of 4.1 million workers, 4,000 things can go wrong. But the point is, are we remediating that? Are we addressing the problems and facing them is what needs to be done. So instead of being defensive, brands, manufacturers, and labor, all of us need to be together, because there is no other alternative in today's post-COVID or during COVID world than being collaborative. Thank you.
Is there a special role for the BGMEA to contribute to this power change properly?
Well, we hope that there's going to be a power optimization and not a power shift. We don't want anybody to be powerless, and we don't want everything to be controlled by us. Then again, there'll be another anarchy. So we need to all be strong in our own places and be fair. I think fairness is what we want. I think we all have to engage. Yes, BGMEA has a big role to play. BGMEA has already been talking about it, even in RC, in RMG Sustainability Council. We just have not just vision, structural, electrical, and fire. We've also brought in the element of labor and environment. It's a vision that we are building. So we need to be actively engaged. And of course, BGMEA has a big role of changing the mindsets of manufacturers and also the brands. So we will talk to our constituency, and we are always constantly engaging. For the last 1.5 years, we haven't had many disruptions or many outbursts. So hopefully, we are on the right track, and I hope that this continues, and so that all of us put in our dosage of sanity and empathy in the entire discourse.
Okay, thank you so much. Over to you, Herman Young. Having visited your company in Cambodia, I certainly didn't get the impression that you are utterly dependent on buyers, that you are a strong player in the industry and also an innovative player, doing that what McKinsey also said, that quite a few larger entities at the manufacturing level are doing. They are providing additional value. So where do you see this kind of equalization of power coming around? And to back it up with a question with regard to change is, what is necessary to prepare your workforce for what lies ahead?
Actually,
no, it's okay. It's okay. Can hear you.
Oh, okay. But this is a good question, and but I would say I would agree with Dr. Hook said. That is, I don't see a major power shift, or in the coming times, is going to be because of COVID-19 is waking up all the people. Sustainability is waking up. I don't think the power shift would connect it to this, because but I understand the question, understand why people is asking this. But I would say, look at what the business is doing. We are doing free economy business. So this is, no one is controlling who to place order to who, at which country, at what price. And then we have to understand this, it all comes by the market. It all determined by the competitiveness of the country, of the single manufacturers, the efficiency, and all these things. And all these come up together with a sophisticated mechanism, calculations for the buyers, for the brands, for the retailers. So where they would place the orders, where they would spend these orders to which country. So, but I would say that is, as a manufacturers, we try our best to control the budget to give excellence, operations, performance for this, because we have factories in different regions in Cambodia, Myanmar, and China. And look at these regions, they have all very different minimum wages. That means cost per minute among these countries are very, very different. So I cannot say it why there's a single T-shirt they're placing same price all over these countries. There are different parameters associated with these countries' efficiency workers. But the second point I want to say that is that there is no good or bad behavior for the buyers, but there are behavior or the ordering pattern that matters. I would say that is someone would name it as a merchandising practice. Someone would say this is ordering patterns. Try to understand a factory, the workers, they need stable orders, they need stable jobs. They cannot have too much jobs, too much orders at a month, and the second month they got nothing to do. So I mean the volatilities, the up and down of the patterns to the factories, the countries, that matters. And then if we look at the COVID-19, we don't need to look at each specific factories. Look at these different countries. Suddenly PMI shoot up, suddenly drop it down, and that really have a very big difference. So try to think back about, again, we talk the ripple effects, the bullwhip effects from the supply chain. That means a little bit swing from the upstreams that cause a big variations at the downstreams from the supply chain. So that means a little bit decisions delayed or changing from the buyers that cause a big difference, big swing volatility along the supply chains, especially the upper supply, the streamlines, they have seriously affected. And then when we talk about the third thing I want to talk about is the investment that we talk about, the investment in sustainability. So do you think that we can pay cheaper for sustainable products? We can pay cheaper for lower price for recycled materials? I think that from nowadays, this industry, the recycle industry, the sustainable materials industry, they are starting. They cannot compare with the current virgin materials industry, the cost. These materials that come from economy of scale. So they built by economy of scale for many years, many decades. That means the price is very different from nowadays the recycled materials, the sustainable materials. And then we need, for example, for the energy, so I talk about the solar energy. So someone has to invest to these solar panels to take like 5 years or 8 years ROI to wait it until come back. But try to think about, if we are not prepared to pay for sustainability, if the consumer is not educated to pay for this extra cost, and then the manufacturers cannot do this alone, then there's no free money in the market can give you to do this investment. And then we, as a manufacturers, we are the direct investor for this sustainable equipment, materials, and all this. So try to think about this, is come back to the game theory again. Nobody is investing, nobody is prepared for that, then it's never happening. So it's about collaborations, change the mindset. And once we start up this, and then it will grow. Like, so it's like it is COVID-19 give us a chance to rethink. And then I'm sure that also agree, it is already started and it will grow. The concept, the sustainability concept, and then to remind the people it is growing. But can we accelerate this? Is this fast enough for us to combat like the climate change? So this is very important. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So communication and transparency to drive change also down to the consumer level. I come back to a bit later asking again how to prepare your workforce. But maybe I'm switching to Ms. Akhter again for the workforce part. We believe that trade unions are pivotal parts when it comes to really drive change and also to close the power gap between employees, the workers, and the company, the manufacturer, for example. But when I heard the discussion and also talking about a coalition between maybe the companies, the business associations, and trade unions, so you are in a double difficult situation as a trade union in Bangladesh, not just having your discussions with the BGMEA and other business associations in the country, but also supporting the manufacturers in their position, vice versa, market brands and retailers, their clients. So how do you cope with this situation? So you're talking to the companies in your country, but you also want to drive change in brands and retailers here. We cannot hear you.
So So we are talking about the green factory in my country, but what do the workers' life is green? That is also the question. And yeah, because the power distribution, what I'm saying, is a challenge for Bangladesh and other countries. See the Donald Trump, the American president, is a business people, and in our country, also the most of the garments owner and the business people are in the parliament. So the administration and business both are running by them. It means the brand and supplier both are in the powerful globally and locally. So there is workers has nothing. So that should be power should be distributing. And of course we are optimistic and we are trying to be responsible. unionized and the responsible industrial relation, that is only come from the only the worker side. It should be also come from the management side, and it's a vice versa. It need to be approached from both sides. The union we have in Bangladesh, question of the quality, question of the collective bargaining, what the benefit workers are gaining, how what percentage. So we don't need the quantity, we need the quality. That's the things. So I think there is a issue if we really wanted to the power distribution or work this issue. See that if the workers have any disciplinary or any unrest or anything happen, and then they are arrested by police, they are blacklisted, they lost their job when they wanted to unionize, force, resign, and they don't have any job security, anything, because they are always penalty and punishment. But like the brand who are not accountable and holding goods, suspension, discount, so-called bankruptcy, and they are not paying the bill to supplier, they don't have any punishment, any penalty, or any international law for them to protect the supplier or protect the workers. If I'm going to the my country, the Rana Plaza 7 years anniversary, Tazreen 8 years anniversary, and series of fire incident, building collapse, lot of things happen. Is there any supplier has been get any punishment? Any penalty? No, but the workers are getting. So we are optimistic. We wanted to help, but from the business community, they are not doing that. If I'm going to the 40 years back in the garments manufacturer, what is their life and lifestyle? And today, where they are. But 40 years back, the people, garments workers, or the workers who are working, how they are living, where they, what they eat, how their children are stay, where they live. Nobody is taking this responsibility. Only the business community, they are thinking about the profit, profit, profit. People are greedy and people are corrupt. Even I'm not saying that only the manufacturer. Many cases also from the worker side also have a lot of challenges. Yeah, that kind of things, as long as from my side, I'm not correct, if from the supplier side, from the brand side, we can talk, we can dialogue, we can say, my I'm bad, the supplier bad, union bad. No, how we can make the good things, that initiate need to be take, and we need to be that kind of things. Otherwise, the system will never change. And women dominating sector, and women are treated cheap labor. That's the things need to be concept should be changed. How women should get the respect, how they get the leadership position, how they can take their decision at the workplace, at the society. We have not changed that kind of things. We give lot of things to the business people, for the brand, for the supplier, but our life is hunger. This kind of anger things need to be action, and we need to be hope. Anger, hope, action. Without it will not work. So how it will be work? That need to be things. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that was a compelling statement also with regard to the topic of the role of unions to bring together workers to voice and also bring them to the negotiation table. Which brings me to Christina Hayos-Clausen again. You are working on shifting power relations in the industry, not just in Bangladesh, but in other countries. You are talking to brands and retailers, ready-made garment manufacturers, and others. What do you do as a global union to strengthen the situation of those at the receiving end of change, especially the workers?
So I think one thing that's really important that we've worked as industrial with some global brand retailers is how to reform their purchasing practices to identify the greatest negative impact on wages and working conditions that their purchasing practices do. So under that umbrella, we have a commitment from 21 global brands who are who signed the MOU with Industrial around the ACT initiative to make 5 specific changes to their purchasing practices, and also to have that monitored by Industrial. I think one thing that's really changing in the supply chain, and I think this, I think you alluded to it a little bit in your question earlier about how trade unions also interact with brands, but also interact with suppliers. And many times interests are the same interests as the manufacturers. When we think about the risk in the system, that risk is on us. I mean, Nazma rightfully pointed out the role that, you know, low wages have for workers. We see that as a systemic problem, but that can't only be borne by the manufacturer, right? We can't enter into an agreement with the manufacturer to increase wages and then the prices of the garment don't increase, right? Something has to shift in that. And, you know, I've said it before and I say it over and over again, we really see this as a role of collective bargaining on an industry level, because it's key to take that wage piece out of competition and to compete on efficiency, productivity, innovation, all things that the manufacturers have proposed that are key things in this industry. So that, I think, is really a shift. I think the problem that we have is that we have some brands out there who do not want to have that relationship with the trade unions. And they want to continue their practices that they have, and they want to not be held accountable by workers in their supply chain. So that, I think, is the work that we as Industrial, and I hope together with the manufacturers, can also continue this to increase the platform of brands who say, yes, we want to make, we know the business practices that we have a negative impact on workers and manufacturers in the supply chain. How can we pull together? So I feel optimistic that there is, I know Rubana mentioned that she doesn't think we'll see this in our lifetime. I feel a little bit more optimistic. I hope that we'll see it in our lifetime. I think that's what we've all been working towards, and there is a shift going on. And I think if we're able to harness that work, you know, that solidarity that you mentioned, Matthias, on how to move forward, I think there is a potential to transform, to have a paradigm shift in the supply chain. And I see that already starting. I see the work that's happened under the Accord, under ACT, now moving to the RSC. That's all part of this shift. And I think if we are smart about it, we will be able to make that shift a reality for manufacturers and their workers in the supply chain.
So building a
Thanks.
coalition between unions or workers, manufacturers, and brands to drive change? Christina?
Yeah, I think that's the only way forward. I mean, we saw a little bit of it around the call to action, where there was an attempt to try to pull the industry in the same direction, right? Specifically for manufacturers, that brands would commit to pay for orders in production already, right? I think that's a surprise to consumers that was even at a question that global brands wouldn't do that. So we did have to have this kind of, through the, you know, the coordination of the ILO, have this, you know, this statement that brands sign on to and pledge to do. I mean, that's, you know, important. And I think also the idea of the social protection, I mean, that's still in the cards. That's going to happen. I mean, we can't have a system of manufacturing where we see workers, you know, not being able to feed themselves because they don't have a social protection safety net. Now, yes, employers, workers will have to contribute to the formation of that, but brands also have a very important responsibility to do that as well. And that responsibility comes with, you know, their sourcing model informs them, and their due diligence clearly shows that they have a role in this too. And that's just not to say to the governments and to the suppliers, yes, you must have a social safety net, but they also need to pay for it. So I think those are the elements that are out there right now. And I agree, we have to jointly all work together. If we don't, then I think we're just going to continue the same cycle that we've been in for many years. But I am optimistic. I do see that there is potential for change.
Knowing that the hurdles also with regard to ACT are there. We saw that in, for example, in Cambodia with a patchy progress. But shifting over to Matthijs again, and let's put something like your associations, but also maybe the STAR network or other forums on the table where manufacturers and associations from producing countries try to join forces to contribute to the power shift?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Before I go into that, I have to say, I fully agree with Christina about the working together, and also on the one hand, the systemic changes that are in our favor by creating value for everybody, moving away from that deflationary system. But on the other hand, that's not enough. I think we need to create infrastructure together along which we can develop more equal relationships in the supply chain. And actually, developing infrastructure is also a job that we have to do all together with all the different components of the industry. Only then it will be valuable infrastructure. We have a practical example where we are collaborating with a lot of IF manufacturers members and with the STAR network, which is also a group of manufacturing associations, which is supported by GIZ. And what we were looking at is that we thought that we need to literally and figuratively speaking build a new contract in the industry. Rebuilding trust needs a new contract. So we have teamed up with GIZ's Fabric project and the STAR network of industry associations in a project to approach purchasing practices from the manufacturer's angle. So we are going to create an exercise in which around 10 associations, including BGMEA, will build their recommendations for payment and delivery terms. A very practical exercise. And even though the intentions are often good, purchasing practices are quite often indeed viewed, and sometimes are, an offer made to manufacturers by buyers. But what it needs is an inclusive discussion. And so we think the project will help to create a more equal discussion about purchasing practices by giving manufacturers the chance to sort of, build a fence around them for a few months and answer the question, if you were asked what are your ideal payment and delivery terms, what would they be? And then throw them into the wider discussion that we'll have with everybody. And we're looking at different components. What are red lines that can't be crossed? What are some recommendations? But also very much so, what are some innovations that we can have together? Because if systems change, if relations in the supply chain change, those can be supported, and that's the infrastructure by different agreements among each other. And that all needs to come together in an inclusive talk where you have the manufacturers and the buyers all operating on the same level.
Thank you so much.
So I think that's a.
I think that's
that's a practical example.
Yeah, I also think that that's also contributing and hearing from all of you that that the shift is happening, maybe not fast enough, and with regard to the input from Ms. Akhter, maybe also not reaching everybody fast enough. But there is shift happening, and I would like now to have a look at the Wissembly results from our questions, and looking at the first question. The shift from arm's length business relations towards longer term business relations based on partnership and trust. So the medium would be 2.5, and we see at least a slow well, with 3.3 in the direction of 5. So it seems to go a bit that way, at least from our audience perspective. Let's have a look at the second question. We'll see a power shift, and this is a rather medium point, right? We see 2.5 is exactly in the nearly exactly in the middle of the answers. So there is some shift, but it's not really decisive. Let's have a look at the third question. Next 5 years, will we see an increase in real wages for employees in garment and supply chains in Asia? And this is, I think, from the perspective of those people in the audience, this is a lot of water in the wine. So the topic of living wages that we have also addressing in the partnership will be still, when I interpret these not empiric data, will be still an uphill battle and will be on our plate, and certainly also the plate of the panelists for the coming years. And the last question: will the next 5 years see a shift from opaque supply chain relations to full transparency? And here we have a more positive view, which goes quite a bit along the interpretation also from McKinsey, said that transparency compared to and directly related to data will play a bigger role. Transparency and traceability, and also to close the gap here to what Hermann said earlier, that the transparency, the data and the communication is important, and this is being supported also by the people in the room. I'm having a look now at one additional question I'm getting from the audience. I try to fill in your question or the questions from the audience during discussion already. I'm now addressing directly a question to Hermann here. Power shift means also giving more weight to the perspective of workers and their representatives, the unions and the civil society organizations. What concrete procedures have you in place to bring about a power shift? How do you bring your workers into the decision in your decisions in your company, and also to is there some, for example, a specific grievance mechanism, remedy procedures? How do you negotiate wages, for example?
It's also a good reminder that
yeah, now
we're
okay. On. Yeah.
So I think it's also good to remind that there's not only talking about the power shift from the buyers to suppliers, but also for the manufacturers to the workers. So for us, we've been in place for the social dialogue, grievance procedures from our workers from time to time, and also we continue to evaluate ourselves or how to tackle the real problems from our workers. Especially for Cambodia, we have been almost like 20 years. And then how we should build a better dialogue. Because nowadays, as the panelists already mentioned, we are not only talking about due diligence. We're not only talking about audit basic compliance to the law. But we also we need to get more advanced to look at into what the worker needs, and then the communications, and then well, you even talk about the wages, how we can improve their wages from time to time. And back to the years, we also have some projects like fair living wage. We have survey to the workers to see how their spending habits, and then how could we help them to work together to increase the wage level. For example, we talk to the unions, talk to the line leaders, and then we think that what is the value we should add into our products so our buyers get it, and then eventually we get higher wages from there. So eventually we have some more, for example, like collective line bonus and performance bonus. And also we have introduced internally what we call it a wage grid. So we defined the skills, defined what is value from our factory's perspective, from the buyer perspective, from the product perspectives, what can value we could add it into, and then what skills that workers they can learn or they can get trained to in order to let them to earn more. For example, if they have high efficiency, if they can work into a semi-automatical hanging system line, if they can be an operator for the RFID control, because we continuously update our technology as well. If they can help to equip the industrial engineering knowledge, they get the timer, they calculate the efficiency, and then they invent some tools for making the garment, to making some tools for the sewing machines. And then all this, we give incentives. And then after the years, I mean, for the years around, that we are driving for the right directions. What is a better efficiency that comes to a more competitive price from our FOB, and then eventually the workers they get earn more from before. And then these, I think, no matter what, it is the mentality, the system, what incentives, what we are driving that behavior. So come back to what previously I've said. If the incentive is making them a short-term behavior good, that that outcome is short term. If your incentive is making a long term behavior good, driving for the value that ultimately long term we can achieve that we are bringing a long term value to the workers, to the manufacturers and the buyers as well. That we think this is sustainability. And yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to, also with regard to timing, quickly jump to the last round of questions we have. And I would like to ask you to be very time conscious here so that we can jump into it. And I would jump into with a question to Ms. Akhtar first. When it comes to what are your expectations. You already mentioned quite a few expectations. You talked about fair behavior and so on, but maybe you could put it more bluntly. What would you as a union leader in Bangladesh expect from brands and retailers that buy the products your members produce?
Thank you. I want from the brand or retailer that they have to be ensure their whole supply chain should be fair and transparent, because you know in Bangladeshi garments worker also not producing in Bangladesh, they are also working in Jordan, Mauritius, different country, and there is also they are not getting that those country minimum wage also. So this issue also very important. And I want that you know that as the good factory, bad factory, or medium category factory. For example, in Bangladesh, I work with the number of factory, and we have number of quite union and significant successful trade union, collective bargaining, gender-based violence. Lot of issue we are improving, as well as the productivity. So we need to be awarding who care more about the workers and who is signing a who is giving more welfare and well-being to the workers. So those kind of business or those kind of factories should be get the good price, good awarding, this kind of thing that people can motivate and encourage increasing. Because you know every after order they are asking for the low cutting the price. That is not the solution. If they are giving the fair price, then we can ask to supplier for the fair wages. So this issue is very important. As Sister Christina mentioned about our act, about our GFA, about RSC, how we can very easily functionable do in our country and other country. And respect and dignity is very important from the my as a worker. I should respect the supplier, I should respect the brand, but they should be respect us. That is the we need that things. And Again, the life and livelihood, we need to be changed. Business and human rights should be addressing, not the slave, modern day slavery. We don't want that. And we don't want to that kind of system. Only we want our fair wages and fair price. And women should not cheating by the supplier and by the things. We want to work together. We are not saying the solidarity. We want to partnership. We want to collaboration. We want to action together. So I want that could be our future things, and we need some reform the law in locally and internationally for social protection and many other issues. Thank you, sir.
This is a long list. I'm giving it over now to Dr. Hook again. With also, please, as quick as possible, what do you expect from governments in Europe, for example, what should they do without infringing on the sovereignty of other countries?
On other countries?
Yeah, for example, Bangladesh. So when the German government comes up with does something that somehow influences also the situation in Bangladesh, what do you expect or want?
Okay, thank you. So very recently, BMZ and also EU have done also front-loading of support of an ongoing program, which was to support the retrenched workers. So, initiatives like this is one-off, but like I would like to also echo with Najma that there has to be an unemployment fund scheme. So if the governments, the Western governments, and also the industry and everyone else, if we have a collaborative mechanism to build this unemployment fund scheme, then it would be interesting and it would be good. So the governments, the EU governments, it need not be a compulsion, but accountability, at least social accountability, must be woven into the discourse of EU legislations, especially to be on the shoulder of the companies who source from various countries in Asia and beyond. Because otherwise, in cases of bankruptcy, what happens is we don't have any contracts which is internationally recognizable, apart for letters of credit. So, we need to have payment guarantee scheme to be in place. Our receivables must be ensured. So at least an alternative dispute mechanism or alternative dispute mechanism must be in the sourcing contracts, which will be internationally recognizable. If this could be imposed by the governments on their businesses, then it would safeguard our payment at least. Otherwise, we remain at the hands of the brands and retailers.
This brings me very close to Matthijs again, because you're working on this also on this binding conditions and contractual relations. Maybe you can add to that.
Well, I think I explained it in broad lines. Like I said, the industry needs a new contract, figuratively speaking, in the way it operates, and literally speaking. And I think, indeed, there needs to be a lot of work to be done there. That's part of the infrastructure that is now clear that we are lacking as a global industry, that we are building, but that is far from complete. And in building it, we need to collaborate. So I would like to add that we should all make the maximum effort to really engage in those partnerships. And that goes on all the levels. That goes the buyers and the suppliers, that goes between employers and employees, that goes in international organizations like the one I represent and the others, and governments and industry. It's really very much about taking the partnership seriously.
Thank you. And handing over to Mr. Leong again. when you talked, first of all, when you talk about game theory and partnership and cooperation and so on, there seem to be barriers that impede this cooperations. What do you see from your side, but also from the brand side? What are the activities, the measures, the strategies quickly to overcome these barriers for cooperation?
Okay, so if you really look at this theory, if we look at this, that is the third party. In order to solve this game theory, there's also only two parties that compete each other. At the end, at the expense of each other, get the worst outcome. But every time that needs to a third party. I mean, in reality, I don't know how could be possible, but if we can think that third party, it could be easily for the government or the NGOs that comes to have transparency and on the behavior that is happening. But for example, now if we talk about transparency third party, you can see that it's really happening in the manufacturing and the workers and union side. That is ILO, right? ILO, International Labor Organizations, they come, give audit, give transparency report, and then comes together, and that improves the industry relationship amongst time to time so much. Say that in Cambodia, the ILO better factories, they really do help a lot for the industry, for the manufacturers to change their mindset, to give transparency, and then to improve their sustainability level, to improve the social problems. But if you take the example, put it into the buyer side and the manufacturer side, we don't see any mechanisms which party is doing this decision yet, or who should be in this position. I know that's difficult because free economy, free market again. So this could be a creative solution sooner or later.
Yeah, okay, addressing the barriers. And to round this discussion up, I would like to hand over the word to Christina Hayaks-Clausen with a question, maybe a bit unorthodox. What do you expect from civil society and unions in Europe to drive change?
So in Europe,
yeah.
Well, I think our affiliates in Europe who represent textile and garment workers are providing a lot of solidarity to our affiliates in production countries. So that solidarity work is quite important. That's one of the major pieces of work that Industrial Global Union and its affiliates do. So to make that connection between between our affiliates in different countries. I mean, just for one example, we've started, it's not only that production takes place in Asian countries. I mean, we just launched a Coats, which is the thread company, a global union network in Coats, and that includes trade unions in Germany, trade unions in Thailand, trade unions in Indonesia, trade unions in Bangladesh. So the multinationals manufacturers have a long chain. So I think that you see that solidarity happening and information sharing between the trade unions in Western Europe and trade unions in production countries.
Thank you so much. That there's also, I think, a strong link between trade unions and civil society here, supporting the trade unions and civil society in producing countries. And with this, I would quickly offer you a look at the picture that has been drawn. And we were planning that to give you a very quick look at it and say one or two sentences what jumps into your mind when you see these pictures. And I would quickly ask, and I would like to ask Dr. Hook to start off. What is the main take when you see this kind of picture, where should we aim with future supply chain relations?
I can't even see properly.
Okay.
It's not even in my big screen.
Okay.
It's hard to see it.
I'm sure. It's
Okay,
very
so I
difficult.
think then we have to jump it. If we cannot solve the technical problem here, we will send it to you and ask you, maybe we can get a written thing. So now, thank you so much for your discussion and your very worthy contribution to these discussions. We at the Partnership for Sustainable Textiles working for this change in supply chain relations in the coming years, covering the important topics, and we offer you, everybody in the industry, companies, civil society, standard organization, trade unions and business associations, our cooperation, working together with you to drive change.